The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So what I'd like to talk about today is the options that we have in dealing with responding to painful feelings and emotions. You know, a very human situation that we all find ourselves in often. Okay, and as probably many of you know, or some of you know, I'm going to do a retreat here, lead a retreat starting next Sunday on the Buddhist teachings from the Pali Canon. So I'm going to call them suttas because that's what it's called in here. Sutras in the Mahayana, but sutta, I'm going to take a sutta from the Connected Discourses of the Buddha. These books are enormous. They could kill you if they fell on your head, and this is only one of them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this sutta, and I thought I would read part of it first. I'm not a very good reader, so bear with me. Then I'll talk about it, okay? And here we go. So this sutta is called the dart, or sometimes it's called the arrow. But I like the dart because darts are a bit more subtle than arrows. And I think feelings and emotions, sometimes they're like an arrow, but mostly they're like darts. Okay. The uninstructed worldling feels a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, and a neither painful nor pleasant feeling. The instructed noble disciple too feels a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, and a neither painful nor pleasant feeling. When the uninstructed worldling is being contacted by a painful feeling, he, and of course you can substitute she here is fine, he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He beats his breast and becomes distraught. He feels two feelings, a bodily one and a mental one. Suppose they were to strike a man with a dart, and then they would strike him immediately afterwards with a second dart, so that the man would feel a feeling caused by two darts. So too, when the uninstructed worldling is being contacted by a painful feeling, he feels two feelings, a bodily one and a mental one. Being contacted by that same painful feeling, he harbors aversion towards it. When he harbors aversion towards painful feeling, the underlying tendency to aversion towards painful feeling lies behind this. Being contacted by painful feeling, he seeks delight in sensual pleasure. I just want to say, here he's not just talking about sex. He's talking about, 5 brownies or, the whole night on your computer. That's, okay. Where was I here? Okay. For what reason? Because the uninstructed worldling does not know of any escape from painful feeling other than sensual pleasure. When he seeks delight in sensual pleasure, the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feeling lies behind this. He does not understand as it really is the origin and the passing away, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these feelings. When he does not understand these things, the underlying tendency to ignorance in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling lies behind this. If he feels a pleasant feeling, he feels it attached. If he feels a painful feeling, he feels it attached. If he feels a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he feels it attached. In other words, there's a lot of attachment going on here. Okay. This is called an uninstructed worldling who is attached to birth, aging, and death, who is attached to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair, who is attached to suffering. When the instructed noble disciple is contacted by a painful feeling, he does not sorrow, grieve, or lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and becoming distraught. He feels one feeling, a bodily one, not a mental one. Suppose they were to strike a man with a dart, but they would not strike immediately afterwards with a second dart, so that the man would feel a feeling caused by one dart only. So too, when the instructed noble disciple is contacted by painful feeling, he feels one feeling, a bodily one, not a mental one. Being contacted by that same painful feeling, he harbors no aversion towards it. Since he harbors no aversion towards painful feeling, the underlying tendency to aversion towards painful feeling does not lie behind this. Being contacted by painful feeling, he does not seek delight in sensual pleasure. For what reason? Because the instructed noble disciple knows of an escape from painful feeling other than sensual pleasure. Since he does not seek delight in sensual pleasure, the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feeling does not lie behind this. He understands as it really is the origin and the passing away, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these feelings. Since he understands these things, the underlying tendency to ignorance in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling does not lie behind this. If he feels a pleasant feeling, he feels it detached. If he feels a painful feeling, he feels it detached. If he feels neither a painful nor pleasant feeling, he feels it detached. This is called a noble disciple who's detached from birth, aging, and death, who is detached from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair, who is detached from suffering. Okay. So if you're not familiar with the Pali Canon, sometimes in some of the suttas there's a lot of repetition. So you heard the repetition there. And partly that was a way for people to remember things, because the Buddha's teachings were actually not written down to hundreds of years after he died. And it said that people memorized them. So they used this tool of repetition. So I first want to say that the term the uninstructed worldling is not a condescending term. You could hear this and think, the Buddhists think they're better than other people in the world. It's just what it's referring to is people that have not come in contact with the truth of the way things are. They're just ignorant of certain karmic matters and repetitions, okay? They haven't connected the dots yet, okay? And obviously, people of other religions or people who are not religious come to the same conclusion that the instructed noble disciple of the Buddha does in their own experience. So I don't want to start this out as I think there's these two camps, and Buddhists don't have the grab on enlightenment and awakening. It's for everyone, okay? And all kinds of people awaken in different ways, okay? But when he's referring to the instructed noble disciple, well, that's us who are Buddhists, okay? And we've had the good fortune to come in contact with the Buddhist teachings. Now, whether or not we have understood and taken advantage of those teachings is another matter. And that doesn't matter who we are as Buddhists, whether we're lay practitioners, monks, been at it for a year or been at it for 50 years. We ourselves have to take advantage of those teachings. We have to penetrate the truth for ourselves. Yeah, and of course, as most things in life, there's a learning curve. Sometimes Buddhism, it's referred to as the gradual training because it takes time. So we have to have compassion for ourselves as we keep beating our heads against the wall with certain things. It takes time to figure them out, okay? And that's fine. Yeah, we don't necessarily learn from our painful experiences in an instant. Okay? Sometimes events have to play out numerous times before we don't inflict the second dart into ourselves. Because in fact, the inflicting of the second dart is us. It's not somebody from the outside. Okay, I think it's clear in there that that's us that are inflicting that second dart. Yeah. So at the beginning of this sutta, the Buddha basically lays out the human condition. Okay? We all have pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings. Okay, these are the first dart. It's just the human condition. We're not blank. We're not insensitive. We got feelings. We got emotions. We get hurt. Things happen. Okay. So I want to say that even the most awakened person feels pain. The Buddha in his life, he felt pain. He got hit by a rock that somebody had chucked at him, and he had a pain in his shoulder, I think it was, for the rest of his life. He felt pain. Okay. So even the most awakened person feels pain, physical pain with sickness and injury, and things and tinges of mental and emotional pain with loss, disappointment, sorrow, grief, and you could kind of keep going. So what I'm trying to say here is because someone is awakened or has been practicing hard for a long time, it doesn't mean that they don't have any emotions or feelings, and that they don't have a certain sensitivity that goes along with those emotions and feelings. That, again, is part of the human condition. And the problem really isn't the initial pain. I mean, it's unfortunate. But rather, where we take the pain. This is the real point of the sutta. So we are human beings. We have emotions and feelings. But we also have a choice to acknowledge our feelings and emotions and sit still with them, or we can spin off with them, okay, and give them a bigger place in our mind than they actually are due. Okay? If we choose to give them a bigger place, they in many ways become a self, and they can color our whole being and distort our view of life. We suffer and we become unhappy campers. Okay? We've all been there. The why me syndrome, that sets in, it kicks in, and we become disheartened, resentful, and unkind to ourselves and others because something's happened. Sometimes this can happen with physical pain, but more, the things that we bump into in life, the disappointments, the disillusionments, all the disses. We all run across difficulty and unpleasantness in our daily life. I mean, this is the world of samsara. Thankfully, we're not in a deva world where everything is just wonderful all the time, because you don't notice in that world. You just take it for granted, and then after kalpas, you're gone. And you didn't realize there's something more to do. Okay. Personally, I think it's okay to have a momentary pity party. I think I first heard Reverend Renee's mother say that. It must be a sort of a Southern expression. It's okay to have a pity party for ourselves, but just momentarily, because life is moving on. It's moving on, and we're best served moving on with it, rather than getting stuck with something. And I know this is not always easy. Reverend Master Jiyu used to say to us, before I say that, Reverend Master used to say that this is a different thing, that when someone close to us dies, we're going to grieve that loved one, okay? And it can take a year, it can take a couple of years. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the word grieving and grief, okay? When my mother died, I think for most people when their mother dies, it's a bit of a big thing. I grieved for a year or more, okay? But it wasn't this kind of morose grieving. She was on my mind. And okay. So it was wintertime when she died, and it was really interesting. I would go around, or as I went around, I would see things in the winter, and things are, a little bleaker in the winter. The leaves are off the trees. You don't see the bright, shining pine little things on the fir trees and the pine trees. So anyway, things are a little bleaker. And I would look at things and I would say, well, that's going to die. And actually it wasn't negative. It was just simply a profound understanding for me of impermanence. It's just how it is, okay? So I look at the landscape and say, well, that's going to die, that's going to die. But it wasn't negative, and of course I didn't do it all the time. And I came out of it. And the night my mother died is interesting. The thought went through my head, this is unfair. My mother was 61. She just retired from a nursing career that she went back to after raising 7 kids. She had a lot of break in her life. So the thought goes through my mind that this is unfair. But then as I stick to that, with the unfairness for a little bit, it just begins to move. And it just moves right on out. And I realized, although it didn't stop the grieving or the sorrow or wishing things might have been another way, that she'd had more years to live, I just saw I didn't have to attach to the unfairness. I mean, life has a quality of unfairness in it. That's the way it is. And we're better served to just accept that. So I was really felt really fortunate with that realization of the movement of unfairness, that I had my Buddhist practice and I had my daily meditation practice. I also realized that I needed to immerse myself even deeper in the practice. I was in shallow water. But I had this opportunity. If we study the Buddhist teachings, if we maintain a consistent, regular meditation practice, we get so many priceless tools to help us live life with wisdom and compassion. At least this is my experience. Okay. Formal meditation clues us into the fact that things arise, seem to abide for a while, and then they pass away. I think this is most of people's experience. They don't stay there. The good things, the awful things, the in-between things. There's a movement there. Okay? They're impermanent. These feelings, the things that cause them, they're impermanent. So unpleasantness and difficulty move on. That's a real guarantee you have with impermanence. If you're in a place where it's looking black and awful, it's not going to last. It might be there for a while, but it's not going to last. And probably there's something to learn there. So the human condition is dotted with painful physical feelings. We have bodies. Bodies get sick, they grow old, they eventually die. There's painful physical feelings, and also there's difficult situations or awkward situations, or sometimes impossible-looking situations that we run into in life. This is just kind of the way it is. The pain, the initial pain or feelings of pain from these things need not trigger the emotional reaction of misery, resentment, distress, and fear. Okay. We draw a distinction in Buddhism between pain and suffering. Pain happens. As I said, the body grows old. We can't control everything in life, inside of us. We can't control everything outside of us. We can't control everything. And so sometimes we're going to be challenged by conditions because we cannot control conditions. We can do a little bit, but we cannot completely control them. So there is pain. But suffering, we say in Buddhism to be optional. So it's pain's the first dart, suffering's the second dart. Pain happens, suffering's our choice. We decided to take it there. Okay? With patience, compassion, and equanimity, we can endure that which we need to endure in life. Patience is such a good quality. Compassion, we sang about today in the different invocations, and there is a lot of compassion out there to help us. There's a lot of compassion in here to help us. And we all can come to a place of equanimity. Anyone, if they want to do the work. So meditation and the Buddha's teachings offer us great tools to work with physical and mental difficulties. And I think that we're all authorities on the matter of suffering. It's not like any of us haven't had much suffering in our life, so we don't know much about it. We actually have this endless volume of suffering that we can go back and look on and learn from. Okay. And as we all know, we've endlessly put our foot into it in life, I don't know, what does that dog do or something, but we've done that a lot. So again, there's this resource here that if we can really look at it, if we can, through mindfulness and clear insight, we can begin to unravel our habitual patterns and responses. Because unless we look at these things, we just kind of keep going, spinning off habitually. And some of the time that causes a mess. We can ask the question to ourselves, is that really the way I want to act? Is it really fruitful? Is it beneficial to myself and others? Might there be a better way? Might there be a better way? It's a good question to pose to yourself, because there's not just one way. There's many ways. A moment of stillness when we have emotional feelings arise helps us sort out often a different response. So just a moment of stillness can change the whole, what'll go on and create a lot less suffering from ourselves and others. My friend on death row says that sometimes it's just about a few moments in somebody's life that, put him in this place as opposed to this place. And of course, there's history behind that, but just a moment. And the stillness that we bring out from meditation into our everyday life really benefits us, okay? Because it allows us to stop in the middle of things and say, wait a minute, do I have to do this? Do I have to engage this suffering? Or is there another way? So this is I want to next give the quote from Reverend Master Jiyu that I was kind of confused with the other quote I gave from her. So she used to always say, cheer up, it may never happen. She would say, cheer up, lass, or cheer up, reverend, or she called the female monks lass a lot of the time. She's a lot older than us. But anyway, cheer up, it may never happen. Because many of our fears just never play out. Okay? And if they do play out, oftentimes they don't play out the way that we had figured they would, we got all worked up about. Okay? And then sometimes things are tough. But it's the way they are sometimes. Okay? So there's a lesson here, okay? There's a lesson for us. And the real thing about life, if we want to live it in a compassionate and wise way, is we have to wake up to the lessons that we're provided with all the time, because they're happening all the time. I mean, no matter who we are, we blow it some of the time, and then we can learn from that. Okay? We can learn from that and find a better way in the future. And it's the person who will look at things, honestly look at them, and reflect on them a bit. The next time when a similar situation comes up, they just don't bite into it right away, maybe. They just are still for a second. Okay, so here's a couple other tools that we have. And they're from Ajahn Chah, the famous Thai forest master. And these were a couple of her favorites, a couple of his favorites, a couple of my favorites too. When people would ask him about difficult situations that could lead to emotional difficulties, he'd say sometimes, if the phone is ringing, don't pick it up. Because, see, we pick it up. The phone is ringing all the time in a sense. Interestingly, when I heard about this, the monk that was talking about it says when his phone rings, he doesn't always pick it up. And people then, when they get a hold of him, say, you don't pick up your phone. He says, oh yeah, I know, I don't pick up my phone. Okay, but we are so bound now with the high tech. We're glued to these things. I don't know if you call them phones. I'm a bit old-fashioned. iPhones, whatever. With the technology stuff, I think it's more about not always having it on. I don't know that it's so much about ringing, because it rings some of the time, but it's this business of always engaging it. And you see people, walking around. A while back, I would see people talking endlessly in the airport on their cell phone, but they were talking so loud, it was embarrassing. And then now I see people walking around with this thing, and they're walking down the street with it. I gather that people get hit sometimes because they're not paying attention. Well, that's a clue, okay? that we, these things, what Master Jiyu used to say is that the relationship you should have with these kind of things is that you use them so they help you, not so they control you. So I don't know, I don't have one. Maybe that isn't a question of control, but it seems I've been at a restaurant with, I hope my nephews don't listen to this, with my nephews and my sister and her husband, and my nephews are on the phone all the time when you're sitting there on the table. Now, we're not talking, they're on their phone, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I thought we went to dinner, but of course I'm not of that generation, so maybe I'm an old poo. But I think now we're probably over-engaging in high tech and media and all these things. So maybe a balance would be a good thing for us all. If we find a balance, when you're out in nature or when you're driving, don't have it on. Take time just to be still. With nature, you're missing something if you're glued to your phone, and you're not seeing all these things that just give us so many natural lessons on life and how to live in a better way if we observe nature. And of course, if you're driving and you got it on, it's crazy. So I wouldn't do that. Okay. Right, I think we just need time, all of us, to just be still. Just be still for a while. Okay. So Ajahn Chah's other response, when people would bring him issues, like people would come and say to him things like, well, you're the head of this monastery. This must be very difficult. There's all these people, and when you've got people, you've got problems and difficulty, and there's all these lay people coming in all the time, and your place is very busy. And he'd just say, I don't pick it up. I don't pick the thing up. And he would, to kind of further talk about the picking up, he would often say, so it's like a person with a heavy rock on his back, and he's walking all around with this rock, and eventually he's just slumping over from the weight of it, and people are telling him, you've got a heavy rock on your back. But you know how we are when we won't have any of it. We just don't. We just keep hauling the rock around. So one day, the person thinks, oh, this is very heavy. I've got a rock on my back, and they put the rock down. And then they realize, well, it's a lot lighter without the rock. But of course, this is common sense. And common sense, as we know, always isn't common. It's, so, but the point of these two things from Ajahn Chah for me is, because we've got a PhD in suffering already, we know about suffering. So the things that, if we get enmeshed in or we get off on, if we know those lead to suffering, don't answer the phone. Don't pick it up. It actually can be that simple. And we can't believe it's that simple because it has to be complicated. Because suffering's complicated. Well, sometimes I think it's that simple. And at least that's what I'm trying to work on. So, thank you very much.